Hey guys, welcome back to DIY Dudes. I'm Drew, and in this video I'm going to be installing some self-leveling cement to level out the floor in this basement. We're planning on installing a floating floor here. There's a few bad spots that are out of level, like a 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch, so we want to take care of that before we install the floating floor on top of it. In order to do that, we're going to use a concrete product we purchased from our local building supply store, which is just your basic self-leveling cement. You're going to want to go ahead and install caulking on the edges of the room you're working in. The reason you're doing that is to prevent the cement from flowing into the room beside it. You want to keep it in the area you're working. This is especially important if you're on a second or third floor because it can literally flow through the walls into the floor beneath you, and you definitely do not want that. You don't need anything crazy, but you are going to need some sort of level to identify the high and low spots in the floor. I've got a 6-foot level and a 4-foot level. I actually prefer the 6-foot level because it's easier to identify the low spots if you have a longer level. If you have a 4-foot level, that's fine too. It'll still work. The next thing you need in order to mix the concrete is you need some sort of paddle mixer. So you can use a basic drill with the mixing attachment, or this is actually meant to mix the cement. It's got more power to mix the concrete thoroughly, but you need this in order to get a very consistent mixture with the concrete. This stuff, you have to do a very good job of mixing it. Otherwise, you're going to get little clumps of concrete powder in your mix, and it's going to end up displaying in the floor after you install the leveler, and it's not going to look good. So you have to do a very thorough job mixing it, and in order to do that, you need a half decent mixer. So I have this stainless steel rounded edge trowel. You can really use anything. You could use a drywall knife, you could use whatever you have. This is actually meant to finish concrete and does a really good job of finishing the edges. The reason I think you need a finishing trowel is when you pour the concrete, you might have to move it around to use the trowel, and a key thing, you use the finishing trowel to flare out the edge. So when you pour the leveling cement, you're gonna have a little bit of a lip. You wanna flare it out with this. Finally, you need a couple of buckets for water and mixing in. You need a sponge for cleanup, and you need a shop vac to make sure that you get rid of any dust before you pour the leveling cement. So before you install any concrete, you wanna make sure the surface is clean, free of any dust or anything, to make sure you get a good consistent bond with the self-leveling cement to the existing concrete surface. So I'm ready to mix my concrete. At this point, just read the directions on the back of the bag. It's going to tell you everything you need to know about mixing your specific product. Keep in mind that some of them do require a primer be applied to the floor before you add the leveling cement. So my product requires 5.5 liters of water. So I've got my mixing cup. I'm going to go ahead and measure that and add it to my bucket before I add my cement. That way, when I add the cement powder to the water, it's going to be a lot easier to mix. If you add the powder first and then the water, you're going to have a lot of dry patches in the bottom of the bucket of just poorly mixed cement. I'm going to add my self-leveling cement to the water, but because I'm in an enclosed room, it's going to create a lot of dust. I'm going to try and run the shop vac while I do that to limit the dust that goes into the air. So we've got our paddle mixer all ready to go. We're gonna go ahead and mix this for about 2 minutes until we get a nice even consistency. So again, you're gonna wanna make sure you do the full 2 minutes or as close to it as you can, because you wanna get rid of any balls of powder. Because we're target leveling certain areas rather than doing the entire room, I want to be very careful and slow about the amount of concrete I'm adding to each area. The first spot I want to do is this corner here. I'm probably going to raise this a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch right in the corner and kind of feather it out. So I'm just going to slowly add it and just let it flow out, and then I'll feather in the edges with my steel finishing trowel. So you can see how it naturally flows like water. So just give it time, let it level itself out, and then you'll feather in the edges. Once you're satisfied, you've done enough area. So you can see with my trowel, I'm just kind of like vibrating it in. I'm just forcing it to flow. It is pretty liquid, but it still has some consistency to it, some thickness. So you got to kind of work it a little bit to really get it to level out properly. You can see too, the surface is nice and smooth. If you didn't mix it properly, you would literally see chunks of cement sticking out of that. And when you finish it, the powder clumps would break and spread all over, making a big mess. So once you're happy with the limits of where you've got the cement, take your trowel and kind of feather in all the edges. Just trowel it out like that. Don't worry too much about this all this muck here. Once I'm done everything and the whole room has had a chance to set up, I'm gonna take a moist sponge and kind of wash the edge a little bit. So all of that kind of messiness and hard-edged concrete there will be gone once you run the sponge over it. But do your best at this point just to level it out and flare it out with the trowel. I'm happy with this one. I'm gonna move on to the next one. I get a little bit aggressive there with the pour. That's okay, we can clean that up with the sponge afterwards if you get a little splash on the walls. All right, so we've let this all set up for about 30 minutes or so. And this is pretty good, but I'm gonna take a dry or moist sponge and just kind of buff out the edge. So that'll take any rough edges out and really do one final consistent blend throughout the whole edge, just to make sure you don't have any ridges that would affect the future flooring install. Just buff it out. You can get pretty aggressive with it. Try and do a good job at this stage, but if you miss something after the fact, you can easily sand it out afterwards. So my specific product needs about 4 hours to fully cure before you walk on it. Check the bag and check the specs on yours to make sure that it's 4 hours as well. It might be 6, might be 8, whatever it is. Make sure you abide by the spec. And then if you have to go ahead and add more leveler after, you can actually add another coat. If you're unhappy with this and you want to bring it up more, you can add another coat, but you check the specs on the bag. You usually have to wait about 12 hours to 16 hours before you do another pour, and you can do it directly on top of this afterwards. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you learned something. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. See you next time.